Hey everyone, Zephan Blacksburg here for another interview for our summit, and I have an amazing person here with me today. This is my good friend Misti Burmeister, and now Misti has been featured on NPR. One of her books was Washington Post bestseller list, got #1 on the list. She's been on Let's Talk Live, and she was featured in Smart CEO magazine. She is an author, she is a speaker, she is a provoker of greatness, and she is here today sharing with us her secrets of how you can pull greatness both out of yourself and others. Misti, how are you doing today?
Oh my gosh, I'm so in love with life and I love hanging out with you, Zeph, and whenever I can, let's always make it happen.
Absolutely. So you are someone who has made a huge difference in my life, and that's why it was important to have you here on the summit. But I really wanted to talk about, you just released this new book. It's called Provoking Greatness, and you really pull the greatness out of people. So I'm curious to start at perhaps imagining someone who doesn't realize where their true talent lies, or doesn't know what passion to follow, because far too many people right now are kind of in this place of limbo, or maybe they're happy but they don't realize that they could be doing more. So I'm curious, like, where do we start in both encouraging others to explore passions and new things, and how do we open ourselves up to it as well?
What a great question. I'm going to start with ourselves, because from there everything else, as you know, ripples out. And if we don't know where we're going or what inspires us or what our passions are or have a sense of purpose in our lives, it's very difficult to encourage other people to have or find or get that same thing. And so many people are stuck. I mean, look, it's a human thing and we all get stuck at different times. Even if you have it right now, pretty good chance you'll lose it for at least a minute and then come back and find it again, right? So how do you find it is really the question, or how do you discover what it is that lights you up? And to get to the answer of that, I want to come back to, Zephan, you used to work at Apple. And so you've probably got iPhone and Mac, everything, right?
Yep.
And you, like a lot of people who are, or maybe they have also Android or whatever, but they love their gadget, right? We all go to the end of the earth to find out exactly how to make the gadget that we have the best that we can, to get the most out of it, right? So you'll get online and you'll research your iPhone to figure out how to use all of its little parts and pieces. Maybe even you go take a training on it. But when it comes to ourselves and what lights us up, we pass ourselves by. So we spend all this time researching gadgets and researching homes and cars and so forth, but then we don't spend any time researching ourselves. And so there's a couple of different things that I want to suggest that people do that will absolutely get them excited and help them to find what their passion is. And the first one is to understand, or excuse me, the first one is to start noticing the people who are around them. Start noticing when you notice people who are around you, noticing the people who are lit up about life, who are they? And how can you surround yourself with more people like that? Go to events, go to conferences, these types of things. Put yourself around other people. Here's another piece to that, and that is stopping at the end of the day and ask. So hang on a second. So first of all, it's exposing yourself. That was the first piece. Exposing yourself to differences, different events, different types of people, and see how you react to those people. See what happens for you. So expose yourself. The second piece is to come inside and ask yourself, what did I learn from this day? Jim Rohn, the former not only business giant but also entrepreneur, also motivational speaker, he used to say, don't just get through the day, get from the day. And I think that is so, so, so powerful. So at the end of the day, ask yourself 3 questions. What are the good qualities that showed up about me today? That's the first one. The second one is, what am I grateful for today? And the final one is, what did I learn today? What did today teach me? And it could be something as simple as, from a more emotional perspective, I have a lot of chaos going on in my life. That's something I realized a couple of weeks ago and had to work that out. And then from a more practical perspective, might sound funny to you, Zephan, but I did not know there was a difference until February of this year between charcoal and coal. I wrote that down in my journal that night because I learned it. And so we want to keep learning and growing. And so oftentimes, like water that has been sitting too long and there's been no inflow or no water coming in and no water going out, what happens to that water?
It gets really gross and nasty.
Yeah, it starts to smell bad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Same thing is true with our brains. If we stop feeding it and we stop sharing what we know, it's the same thing happens. Only we call this thing stuck. And then from stuck, we call it depressed and anxious and all the rest of those words that come after that. So if you want to keep yourself out of stuck, out of anxious, out of depression, consider continuously sharing and learning. That's really the key.
Gotcha.
And here's another piece too, Zeph. A lot of people think that somebody else is supposed to tell them what to do. So, somebody's supposed to tell them, go take this training. Somebody's supposed to tell them, go meet this person. Somebody's supposed to tell them what to do. Go apply for this higher position. And they're waiting for somebody else to tell them rather than asking themselves, what's important to me? Why do I want that? And what are some small steps I can begin taking today?
So I like that you said questioning what's important to me. So a big thing that I say a lot is most oftentimes people are asking the wrong question because they kind of sit there and they read those articles of like, find your purpose in 5 simple steps, right? And it's not that simple. I think that a big part of it is asking yourself those questions. But the problem is people will sit there and say, what is my purpose? Instead of saying, what do I enjoy doing? Why do I enjoy doing this? Where am I going with this? Where would I like to go with this?
Yeah, I think you're right on, man. Right on.
So we start to ask ourselves better questions, right? And that allows us to dig deeper into our own greatness. And I guess you probably have to get yourself to a certain level before you can pull it out of other people, right? Like it's almost like, before you go into a relationship with someone else, you should get yourself in a good place first, right? Because then it makes the relationship much more balanced. If you're good, then the relationship has the potential to be good. So I guess you kind of have to get yourself to a point before you start working with other people, right?
I think that going back to what I said a minute ago, if you want to create a whole new era in your life and step into your greatness, ERA is a great acronym for what I just described earlier, which is to expose yourself and then stop and reflect and then take action, right? Because if we don't take action, that's a whole new era. Those 3 things in combination, not one set by itself. You have to take action. You have to reflect to learn about yourself, and you have to expose yourself. So exposure, reflection, and action. If we don't do those things every single day, but yet we expect other people will do it, they won't do it. They're going to always do the same things that we do. Very few people, I don't think people are inspired by a lack of action. I think people are inspired by inspiration. They're inspired by people who are courageous enough to take action, even if they're afraid, and especially if they're afraid and share in that journey. So if you're out there exposing yourself, getting yourself a little bit uncomfortable, admitting that you don't know everything, which can be scary. Like I remember when I was there, I didn't know what direction I was going in next. Zeph, I had been doing generational trainings for 7 years. It was the only thing I knew, and I didn't know what was next for me, and I was scared until I finally started to expose myself to other industries and other people who were passionate about, farming of all things, right? I got interested in the food movement, and that's what spurred my next piece. And I started just saying yes to things and then taking action on them. So it's always our action that's going to inspire other people to do great things. Let's just take, for example, you're a great example, and so is Seth Godin, actually. I launched this book the way that I did in large part because Zeph, he says every single day in his blog posts, he says, the great marketer wrote The Purple Cow and Tribes and 37 other books last year he launched. He says, ship your art. Don't wait. It doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be done. And so I shipped. And I'm sure that in fact, I know because somebody sent me all the errors that are in the book, which I think are hysterical. I think that's funny. It's not, I don't seek perfection. I think I seek progress. But the greater point there is that I was inspired by his courage to share who he is. So if you want to inspire other people into greatness, I think you have to do that same thing. And you do it every day, Zeph, and you give me credit. But at the end of the day, it's a mirror right back at you, babe.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. And I feel like if you do have somebody coming back, giving you the errors, you can surprise them and say, all right, here's, let me get on a call with you for 30 minutes, or let me give you something like, you found the hidden gem or the Easter egg, that their programmers do this all the time. They hide Easter eggs in code, and there's little cool hacks and things you can do sometimes to find them. And I know that they've been in programming languages since the beginning of computers. And, that could be your Easter egg. You could always turn it on its head and find a good way to, go about responding to that. But let me ask you this, because I know that you had some fears come up and in launching this book, and you did it anyway, and it's worked out great for you. You've also had some fears come up in working with other people and partnering up on things. And I remember there was one occasion specifically that I know where you said, the reason why I'm going to do this is because it doesn't make sense. And I know you know exactly what I'm talking about, but I'm wondering if you could expand upon just, when we're approached with a task that we know we have to do or think that we should do, how do we overcome this fear and just say, yes, I'll do it? Because it's not as simple as the movie Yes Man with Jim Carrey, where he just had to say yes to everything, but at the same time, you don't want to jump without a parachute. So, what goes through your head in that process? Do you have to stop yourself and say, why am I scared? What do I think could pop up? What is your process there?
Such a great question. And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't always know. I don't. And what came to me when you're talking about this one particular situation where I went ahead and hired a very expensive coach, even though it made no sense, but it did, because underneath there was something. So it was a gut thing. When it doesn't make sense in your head, but there's a reason why you're still going after it, you're still trying to make it happen, there's a reason for it. So go with it. Give yourself over to that gut instinct, which is what I've done, and it's worked out beautifully, and I'm really grateful that I did. When it comes to the book and launching it, I hear in my head almost every day, even right now, oh my gosh, have enough people bought the book? Everybody thinks it's supposed to be a wild success. What if nobody reads it? What if only 10 people actually read the book? Despite the fact that we have over 23 reviews on Amazon on the book, and it only launched a few days ago, I have all these, oh my gosh, is it enough? And I think as a general rule, Brene Brown, who wrote the book, Brene Brown, she did the TED Talk on shame. She's a shame researcher, and she talks a lot about vulnerability. At the end of the day, we have inside of ourselves, as she talks about, a worthlessness issue. Are we worthwhile? And I deal with that every day. Is my work worthwhile? And the truth is, to some, no. And to some, absolutely. So it's a matter of being aware that my work isn't going to help everybody, but only the people that it's meant to help. And so when I stop and think about it from that perspective, I really think there are plenty of people out there who could benefit greatly from the work that I have to share, from the lessons that I've learned and from the work that I've done. And there are people that won't, and that's okay. So it's being able to I come back to those thoughts, and it's every day. It's an everyday thing, Zeph, and it's almost an hourly thing where I get scared. Have I done enough for this book? And I start to function out of a place of fear and start sending out thousands of text messages or emails, or maybe 1,000's a little bit extreme, but you get the point.
Well, I know I always get your text messages doubled up for some weird reason, so at least there's double there. So maybe if you've sent like 500 texts, then maybe you really have sent like 1,000 if it's still doing that.
Maybe you should come fix my phone.
Right. But I think it's really important to point out here, just for everyone listening, because I know you a little bit better, you have multiple books. Like, this is not your first rodeo. And I think it's important to mention that, even the people that we look up to as, so-called experts or as perfect in our eyes or as our idols, they still go through these fears. So this is a very natural thing. So I don't think that it's unnatural for people going through fear to feel this way, right? I mean, you have, is it your fourth or fifth book?
Fourth, yeah.
Fourth. So I just think it's important to note that we just get better at reacting to it, right? Like, maybe your first book, you would have been sending 2,000 text messages. So you're working on that, right? But like, I think that's, a great point of growth for you to look back at and say, wow, here's where I was on the first book launch. I tried so hard to make everything perfect, and it might not have been nearly as successful as, the fourth one, where it went way more smoothly. You've got people like Seth Godin with, he read it and has a quote on the front cover about your work, so I think that's a great point.
And still, Zeph, and still I question its worth. I have Nito Quabain on there who read the book. I mean, those are two of the most amazing people I know, read the book and loved it, and yet I still have that inner critic going, well, And then I got the email saying you made all these mistakes. But the critics that inside of our own head that jump in there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're always kind of there, right? And it just kind of depends on like, you know how if you go to the store and you buy earplugs, you can get certain like grade earplugs. Like you can get ones where it's like you can still hear everything, or you can get like the construction worker ones where you can't hear anything.
Right.
So it's kind of like, how much do you really want to tune out the voice? You know, you obviously don't get that construction grade like pure silence one, because you still want to have the voice inside of you if you're about to put your hand over an open flame to tell you, hey, that's probably not a good idea, right? But like at the same time, you don't want it to block out everything, and then you just go out there making, reckless mistakes.
Yeah, in terms of the voice, you talk about turning it off, and I found that doesn't ever work for me. I found, like, that quote, when you put basically a light in a dark corner, it illuminates it, and then all of a sudden it's clear and you can see what's going on. Well, the same thing is true with that voice. When you stop and honor it, like, that makes sense. The fear makes sense. And instead of resisting it and wishing it would go away, really sitting with it and saying, it makes sense that you're scared. And, basically you're talking to yourself, and that might sound a little crazy, but that's what I do. And that has proven to be the most beneficial way of quieting it. It's not about shutting it down and being angry at the negativity that goes on, but it's really about honoring it and appreciating it, because it's trying to do is protect us, right? So if we can just recognize that that's what it's trying to do and honor it and let it know that it's being seen, then the power it has dissipates all on its own, and you don't even have to clear it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more that we ignore it and don't allow that voice to know that it's being heard, the more it's going to amplify, and that's where the little guy sitting on our shoulder is not sitting anymore and is standing up and jumping up and down doing jumping jacks.
Exactly.
And so I really love, that you work on your inner self, and you talk a lot about honoring yourself, because I think that's such an important thing to do when a lot of times we beat ourselves up, right? Like we don't treat ourselves as good as we deserve on the inside. Now I'm curious to hear a little bit more about the outside, because I know that you have a very specific example of how you were trying to pull out someone's greatness and there was trouble because her passions didn't align with where she worked and what she was doing. So I'm curious if you'd be willing to share your story of back when you were living in your old building, about the woman who worked there that you knew.
Yeah, so just to get to the punchline first, it's really about, are we trying to manipulate somebody or are we trying to motivate them? All right, that was my biggest lesson with that story. I'm happy to share the story, but when you're thinking about trying to inspire somebody or trying to motivate them, the question to ask is, are you on your agenda or are you on theirs? And when I first moved into that apartment building in Towson, I found out that this young lady, Yuri, was in charge of events, which would mean that I would have friends. And I really wanted to have some friends. I was brand new to the area. And so I befriended her. And in fact, I started giving her compliments and appreciating her, all trying to get her to put on events. And when she told me she had no budget, I started giving her ideas and suggestions on budget-free events, and still nothing and nothing and nothing. And then I thought, well, if I just help her with her career, I can get her to management, and then eventually she'll be able to do an event. And so I started giving her lots of ideas on how she could elevate herself in her career. Zephan, she did none of this. She did nothing I suggested that she did. And 6 months later, I'm sitting there with my hands on my head, frustrated as all get out, because here I am trying to be the person who says I am the expert in motivation or in inspiration or provoking greatness, and I was failing miserably, and I did not understand why. And almost in the second that I said to myself, I don't get this, I got it. I had no idea what was important to her at all. And so I got up from my desk, walked over to her desk, and asked her, "Do you like your job, Yuri?" "Nope, can't stand it." I go, would have never guessed. And I asked her, I said, "So what kind of job do you want?" She said, "I got my degree in human resources. I want to be in human resources." And I said, "Yeah, that's nothing like meeting planning." She said, "No, I don't want to be in this job at all." And I said, well, I had already given her lots of my time and thoughts, and I really didn't want to give her any more, to be honest, but I was kind of curious to see what happened, right? So I asked her, I said, "Well, if I made some introductions for you, would you be interested in meeting with some people who are in that industry?" "Yeah, I would love to." I said, "Well, start here." And I gave her some some different organizations to go check out that were related to human resources, and she did it that day, and she reported back to me. I made the introduction. She researched them before I introduced them, reported back to me. Zephan, 6 months later, she landed a job in human resources. You do not have to put greatness in anyone. All you have to do is pull out what's already there.
And I think that's so important that, because I wanted to transition into a little bit of, how we can pull it out of others. And so while we honor our own inner voice, I think we also have to honor the fact that it's already in everyone else. But if we're, if we don't have their best interests in mind, and like you were saying, if we're on our own mission to do something, then it's not really going to work.
Yeah. So I think, when it comes to getting other people to do what they're really great at, I think it's less in telling and it's more in asking the right questions. I think it's less in getting them to do something and more in illuminating what they're really good at. And it's also more in clarifying, asking people what do you want to do and why do you want to do it? If you're in a position of leadership with somebody, understanding that leadership is really about helping other people succeed. What do they want to succeed at? And how do you line up where they're really interested in your organizational goals or your team goals? How do you line those two things up? So if somebody's really passionate about videography, as an example, and they're on your team doing meeting planning, how can you give them an opportunity or help them to see an opportunity that's in that area and then support out loud what they're doing? Meaning share with the whole team. Yuri's doing X, Y, or Zephan's doing X, Y, and Z. He's running after his dreams. Good for him. Let's go team. That's what causes a buzz where people not only want to work really hard for you and want to step into their greatness, but they start to share about how great you are as a leader. Your greatness as a leader has everything to do with your ability to pull out greatness in other people, which has everything to do with listening, really listening to what the folks in your team care about and why they care about it, and then insisting on them taking steps toward what's meaningful to them. That's powerful. That's motivating. That's inspiring.
And along those lines of listening, because it is so important, I know that you've taught me something really great, and I know that you teach a lot of other people how to listen and ensure that you heard the right thing and to check and see if you've heard it all. And I think it would be amazing if you wouldn't mind sharing that with everyone listening as well, because I know it, but I think that this is one of your really great kind of hidden secrets that doesn't always come out in conversation with people. But you use this a lot when people are giving feedback, but I think it's also so great to be used in conversation when you're trying to understand what lights other people up. So I'd love it if you could share that, because when I think we have to use this method that you have both with our inner voice when we're trying to figure out things from ourselves, but we also need to use it when we're talking to others and we're trying to figure out what's going on with them.
Yeah, I used this very recently, in fact, last week with my dad. I think when you're in the middle of the fire is the best time to practice these sorts of things. I'll come back to my dad in a minute. I say in the middle of the fire because family always pulls out our best and our worst, right? They always help us to see where we have the most opportunity for improvement for loving oneself. So here's the thing, and I sort of adapted it, by the way. I hate to take it all as my own credit. I don't think anything's really new anyway. Everything's always redone. But this is what I learned through imago therapy, which is a therapy that's done typically between couples, and it's just a great strategy for making sure you understand. And this is how it goes. So Zephan, what I heard you say is that you'd like to learn more about listening. Did I get it?
Yes, you did.
Is there more?
Not right now.
Okay. Well, what makes sense about what you're saying is that listening skills are incredibly helpful in understanding what other people really want in their life. So I just demonstrated what I do and what I encourage other people to do. So what I'm hearing you say is this: did I get it? Is there more? That's the beginning part. So what I'm hearing you say is this, and it's not parroting. Don't parrot, because parroting comes across as very inauthentic. So if you use the exact same words that somebody else uses with you,
it's going to sound weird.
It's going to sound weird. It's going to sound inauthentic. You've got to listen well enough that you can rephrase it in your own words. So what I'm hearing you say is this, and then did I get it? And if you didn't get it, then they're going to have to repeat it, and then you're going to have to work on it again. It's just a great way to understand what people are actually saying. So if you've got it, then is there more? Is there anything more that you want me to know about? And if there's not, the hardest part with this one is the final part, especially if you're in the middle of an argument and you want to be right. What makes sense about what you're saying is the final piece. So sometimes people don't make any sense at all. But there's got to be something about what they're saying that makes sense. And you've got to find the compassion and the kindness to listen for it. And so if you can share that, then it diffuses them. And when two people are diffused, all of a sudden communication is really simple and very easy and wonderful. Now you're on a communication, not a reaction place. You're on a place of responding to each other and caring for each other rather than reacting to each other. It's just a powerful, powerful tool. The number one tool I would say in all of leadership is the ability to listen and actually hear what people are saying. Because so often we misinterpret what our team is saying or what our employees are saying or even what our boss is saying. We actually think sometimes that our employees don't want to do a good job. That's just crazy. 99.9% of the world's population wants to blow it out of the water. And if that's true, go back and question what they're actually saying and listen better. And 99.9%, because there's always that 0.5% maybe or whatever percent that this doesn't relate to, but most people do. Most leaders want to do a really good job managing. They really do. So can you understand better where they're coming from? If you can seek to come from that perspective rather than they're just a bad leader and they don't care about me, that's crap. They do. They care about their results. If nothing else, they care about their results, and you're a part of that. So if you can show them that you care about them and the results that you're getting, then all of a sudden the reciprocity kicks in and they start to care about you.
And I imagine that this works very well with your inner voice too, because oftentimes I feel like we tell ourselves these things that aren't necessarily true, and because we don't listen long enough, we don't realize what's actually going on and why we might feel anxious or shocked or sad or disappointed or furious or frustrated, you know?
I love that you just brought it up that way, because I've never really actually talked about it from that perspective, and you couldn't be more right. When we don't even acknowledge what we're feeling most of the time, most people don't know what they're feeling because they haven't stopped to hear the thoughts that are going on inside their head because it's too scary. And I bringing back my father up as an example. It's been at least 15 years since my father's yelled at me. And he yelled at me last week on the phone. He was yelling at me and I just stopped everything. And I said, so Dad, what I'm hearing you say is this. Did I get it? No. Okay, let's try again. Say it again. Until I got it. Well, what makes sense about what you're saying is this. And then when we hung up the phone, I had this barrage of shameful emotions come over me. I felt so ashamed of myself because I didn't return the car at the exact same time and place that he thought I should. And all, I mean, I just felt ashamed of myself. And so I went through, and guilty. Shame and guilt were my two big things. And I sat with it for 24 hours and just let myself feel all of that, man. That was heavy, especially because you're dad and you don't want to lose your tribe. That's your family. You don't want to be cut off. It feels like you're going to die. That's how I felt. But if I hadn't felt it, then the feelings get just stuck. And when the feelings are stuck, then, you can't move forward. You take all those feelings into every other relationship with you. It doesn't benefit you. It only sucks your energy. And so I worked through all that and I thought about, well, what could I have done differently? What could I do better next time? Without making a blame on anybody, not his fault, not my fault, just a misunderstanding, or better yet, just an opportunity for improvement in communication and things of this nature. Now that's awesome.
And I think that's really courageous of you to well, first, thank you for sharing a more personal story, but I think that's very courageous of you to be able to, I guess, exit that situation in a way that most people often don't get the chance to. So many of us want to stomp our feet and run away and say, screw this, right, and run away. And I think that it takes a lot of growth and getting to a certain point where, it doesn't end in hanging up the phone on each other.
He did, but I called him back. Don't worry.
Well, there you go. Okay, so
and I have to be honest with you, Zeph, and I considered saying, "You're cutting out. Can't hear you. I'm sorry."
I guess sometimes you have to do that, but it definitely sounds like you came from it. You came from a perspective of trying to understand, of trying to work through it, as opposed to getting the heck out of there.
shutting down. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I mean, this is going to be a lifelong journey. It's not, so I think oftentimes we want to be there. We want to know ourselves. We want to be successful. We want to be all these things now. And we forget that it's in this moment, in this journey, in this conversation with Zephan Moses Blacksburg, that we slowly begin to step into our greatness, into understanding ourselves. It doesn't happen overnight, and it happens over a lifetime. There's so many other pockets of things that I don't understand, and it's always in the roughest emotional time in my life that I get the most juice, the more my heart is stirred and my stomach is stirred, and I feel paralyzed. I stop and I go, what's in this for me? What is it? What is it in this for me? What am I seeing about myself that I don't like? Is basically the question that I'm asking. And because when you're willing to ask that question, now you have power. If we think it's because of them, my dad, our boss, or whatever, we have no power in that. Our power only ever comes from who are we being so that? Who are we being so that they're reacting that way? Who are we being so that whatever, fill in the blank? And then who do we want to be to get the results that we want? And I want to be courageous, and I want to be kind, and I want to be the kind of person that's vulnerable and willing to admit when I'm wrong. And that's important to me. And I did that day. So I celebrated myself.
That's awesome. And you have an amazing podcast that's out there right now. And you also have this book that you just launched. You have a website. You have some other great things. How about if you could share with everybody, where they could gain access to learn more, if they want to provoke greatness in others, if they want to provoke greatness in themselves, if they want to hear, get access to some really great recordings of, I know you've interviewed some really amazing high profile people and just some amazing thought leaders. Where could they find more information about you and find your book?
I think the best place for them to go to is measurablegreatness.com/provoking greatness. Because right now I am giving away a ton of free stuff. All they have to do is go there, plug in their email address, and they get access to 2 e-products, 4 videos. It's just awesome. I would encourage them to go there, and measurablegreatness.com in general is a great place to go to get information. If they're looking at podcasts, first of all, I love your podcast, and second, Provoking Your Greatness is the name of my podcast. So if that's something they're interested in, I'd love to. iTunes, it's everywhere. It's Stitcher, it's everywhere. So go find it, love it.
And the book's on Amazon, so everybody listening in, leave a review, leave a comment.
Please do. I will have Zephan kiss your toes.
Only if you buy the plane ticket.
Right, that's right.
Awesome. Well, it's been great having you, Misty. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with me, as always. And I'm so grateful to you that, I get to spend time with you because you live here locally and we get to talk quite often. So thank you so much for being you.
Yeah, it's all right back at you, babe. And thank you for having me on your show. This series that you're doing, summit that you're doing, is unbelievable and powerful. And I love all the people that you've got on it. I can't wait to get on and check it out myself and get access myself. So thank you so much for including me.
No problem. We'll talk to you soon.
Peace out.